I'm going to wait for a few attendees to come through before I start. All right?
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen again.
Yeah, yeah. All right, looks good. Let's get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, Choose Your WOW. Let's just call it WOW for now. This is brought to you by PMI KSA. I'm your host, Fatma Zohra, and it's my honor to introduce our presenter for this webinar, Scott Ambler. Scott is the Vice President, Chief Scientist of Disciplined Agile at Project Management Institute and co-creator of Disciplined Agile. Scott leads the evolution of the Disciplined Agile Toolkit and can be contacted via PMI.org. Now, before I give the stage to Scott over here, let's just discuss this one point, which is we will take questions at the very end, right, Scott?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, we will take questions at the very end. If you have any questions, please do put it in the chat and I will make sure that I ask that question to Scott at the very end. And before we get started, for this webinar, you will get one PDU if you are if you are a PMI member. That's a very important thing. Everybody wants to know that. And so that's about it. Scott, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much. So anyways, yeah, so what I would like to do is talk about how do you choose your way of working, and how do you allow that within your organization, and why do you want to allow that too? So as you heard, I'm along with Mark Lyons, I'm the co-creator of PMI's Disciplined Agile Toolkit, and I currently lead the IP team to continue evolving the toolkit. So hang on here, I just got to close. Needed to close down messages. My apologies. Okay, so let me just make sure it's quit for sure. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to do a brief introduction of Disciplined Agile. This is a very deep topic. I'm only going to spend a few minutes on it. But anyways, I just want to share some common concepts and how the toolkit is architected to help you. Then we're going to get into continuous improvement, and more importantly, how do you improve upon continuous improvement? And that's something we call guided continuous improvement. So what's Disciplined Agile? So Disciplined Agile is a toolkit. It's not a framework. So this is different than what you might have seen before in the past. So where frameworks and methods such as Scrum and SAFe and others tell you what to do, Disciplined Agile tells you what to think about and then gives you options. It gives you choices. So it's a little more sophisticated than the average everyday method. So it requires a bit of sophistication on your part too. And we'll talk about that. And what we want to do is provide you with searchable and straightforward guidance, so that way you can make better decisions around your team's way of working and your organization's way of working. Because you deserve to have a fit for purpose way of working. So the Agile Manifesto. So 21 years ago, a group of people wrote what became known as the Manifesto for Agile Software Development, or more simply, just the Agile Manifesto. And it addressed software problems of 20 some odd years ago, which is great. It was a wonderful thing. And I'm a firm believer in it. And I know most of the people who wrote it. And the point, though, is that it's over 2 decades old now, and it only focused on software development. It did not focus on business agility, on enterprise agility, what we now want to focus on. So a couple of years ago at PMI, we stepped back and we said to ourselves, well, wait a minute, how would you describe the mindset of agility for enterprise agility, given what we know today, not what we knew and wanted to focus on 20 years ago, because frankly, most of those problems are solved now. But what is our problem today? How do we capture the mindset? And this is what we came up with. So we believe in a collection of principles. And because we believe in these principles, we make promises both to ourselves and to the people that we work with. Here's how we're going to behave. Here's how we're going to work together and collaborate, both within our teams and with other teams in order to get the job done. And in order to fulfill these promises, we follow these guidelines. Now, a couple of points I want to make. So first of all, you have a copy of these slides, so you don't need to madly write all this good stuff down. You also can find all this on the pmi.org website. And I'm going to share some URLs with you towards the end. But pertaining to the material on this slide, though, this is mostly lean thinking. Yes, there's a lot of good agile thinking in there too, but it's mostly lean. So one of the things about DA is that it's a hybrid. We adopt strategies from agile, from lean, even from traditional, the serial ways of working. Why wouldn't we? You know, there's great ideas there. So let's leverage them where we can. So the idea with the mindset is these are shared concepts, or they should be concepts that we want to share across our organization. You know, so we want to be able to interact with our fellow colleagues and understand that they believe in this mindset as well, that they believe in these principles, promises, and guidelines. Now, later on, I'll talk about how we extend these great ideas with domain-specific philosophies, because for example, software people have a different set of philosophies than salespeople, who have a different set of philosophies than finance people, who have a different set of philosophies than security people. We know this. So, and we should respect this, and we should embrace this. So the idea is that we want to have an extensible mindset, so that way we can interact and appreciate people with these different backgrounds, with these different priorities, with these different ways of thinking, and then collaborate with them effectively. And I'll bring this up later. So this is an important point. The Discipline Agile Toolkit, its focus is on enterprise agility, not just software agility. And we've architected the toolkit into 4 layers. The first layer is the foundation layer. This is where all the concepts and techniques and strategies and ideas that are applicable regardless of your domain land. So the mindset is there, roles and responsibilities and team structures and people stuff is there. Great ideas from Agile, from Lean, even from Serial are there. And of course, how do you choose your way of working? So guidance around that. Extending the foundation layer is Discipline DevOps. So DevOps is table stakes for modern organizations. You must be effective at fundamental IT concepts, such as bringing software projects to market, operating and running these software things, doing so in a secure manner, treating data as a real corporate asset, and being able to manipulate and use and evolve data on a very regular basis. So it is possible and highly desirable to be agile in your approach to data. And frankly, if you're not, you're probably in very serious trouble from a competition point of view. So building upon DevOps are value streams. How do we bring products and services to our customers, or in the case of government agencies, to the citizens? And how do we do this effectively? How do we streamline this? How do we bring the right things to market at the right time in the right way? And how does it all fit together? And then finally, building upon that is the Discipline Agile Enterprise. So how do we support these value streams? These hexes that I'm showing are something we call process blades or process areas. The idea here is that all aspects of your organization can improve, can get better, can become more lean or more agile in their ways of working, become more effective in the way that they work and collaborate with others. And that all of these groups of people, or all these teams, will improve at their own rate in their own way, and yet they still need to interact with others, and they still need to be reasonably well aligned. So this is one of the reasons why you want to have a common mindset, but you also need to respect the fact that the finance people do in fact think differently than the HR, the people management people, and that's okay. Let's leverage and embrace those strengths and those differences. So Discipline Agile is an umbrella over a large number of techniques. At the present moment, we have between 16 and 1,700 techniques, practices, and strategies in the toolkit. And what we do is we put them into context. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. Because the idea is what you want to do is pick the right techniques, the right strategies off the shelf to build your own way of working. So, because every team is different. Some teams are large, some teams are small. Some teams are working on software, some teams are working on building buildings. They're going to work differently. Some teams are in a regulatory environment, some teams are not. Some teams are taking on simple problems, some teams are taking on very complex problems. Some teams are co-located, all working together in the same room. Some teams are spread across the planet. And of course, anywhere in between, all of those extremes, of course. Different teams in different situations will work in different ways. Individuals are unique. They're not resources. One of the unfortunate terms in the project management terminology is referring to people as resources. They're not. People are people. Treat them as such. Every person is unique. Every person has strengths and weaknesses, has different priorities, different ways of working. Teams are unique because they're made up of unique people. So we need to embrace this absolute fact and act accordingly. One size, one approach does not fit all. This is one of the fundamental challenges actually with methods and frameworks, is they don't fit all situations, nor will they ever. So teams need a fit for purpose approach. I know nothing about your organizations, but what I do know is that if I was to walk into your buildings, let's say this was, two some odd years ago before COVID, but if I was to walk into your offices, I could very easily point out teams. Oh, look, that team is doing something like Scrum. Oh, look, there's a team following some sort of Kanban-based approach. Oh, there's a team over there. They look traditional. Oh, there's a team over there. Ooh, don't quite know what they're doing, but that's okay, right? Different teams in different situations work in different ways. I have never seen an organization where all the teams work the same, ever. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've seen some organizations that are so small, they're only one team. So of course they're working the same way. But any medium-sized to large organizations, I've never seen it. And I suspect I never will, because it's not realistic. And I've worked in CMMI level 5 organizations, by the way, where they claim they're all following repeatable processes, and they're not. But anyways, good for them. So as a result, because we choose to observe that different teams work in a different way, the DA toolkit supports multiple ways of working, multiple life cycles. So we support an agile Scrum-based project life cycle. We also support a continuous delivery, long-standing team or service team life cycle based on Scrum. So where an agile project team might work for 3 months or 6 months to produce something, a continuous delivery agile team might release new software into production once a week. I've worked in insurance companies, for example, where we took project teams that were releasing once a quarter and got them releasing mission critical, regulatory compliant software into production every Friday morning, and doing so successfully. Cheaper, faster, better quality, because they became more agile. So these two life cycles are based on Scrum. DA also supports a lean project lifecycle and a lean continuous delivery lifecycle, more of a true DevOps type of way of working. They're based on Kanban. Top 2 life cycles are project life cycles. Bottom 2 life cycles are product or service team or long-standing team life cycles, not project life cycles. So this is another challenge for many organizations. Not everything's a project, and that's okay. We support an exploratory life cycle based on lean startup. It's all about creating MVPs, minimum viable products, in order to explore a new idea, such as a new product or service that you think you might want to bring to market, in order to de-risk the development of that product. A program life cycle, which is for a initiative of initiatives, a collection of teams working together towards one common purpose. And coming soon, and we're actually in the process of doing this right now, you can see evidence of this on the website, support for a serial way of working, a serial life cycle, as well as for citizen development. the using low code, no code development tools by business people in order to deliver new applications. Different teams in different situations will follow different life cycles or combinations thereof. And that's okay. That's exactly what we want. Now, when I show this sort of a slide to senior management, they get a little bit worried. What do you mean every team's going to work differently? What do you mean we're going to have to support different life cycles? How do I govern? How do I lead? Well, you need to be competent. Sorry. You also need to be flexible. So Discipline Agile builds explicit governance strategies right in, because this is based on reality. We recognize and embrace the fact that different teams will work in different ways, but they still need to be governed. They still need to be enabled, and you need to keep an eye on them and guide them and all that good sort of stuff. So one aspect of governance is it has to be flexible. You will govern an agile team in a much different way than you will govern a lean team, much differently than a program team, much differently yet again than a serial waterfall team. This is inherently obvious. So a team that works very well for a governance strategy that works very well for a traditional team will be a disaster for your agile teams, and vice versa. But what do you do? So instead of having a documentation-based or an artifact-based governance strategy, or one that's based on defined quality gates, instead in DA, we focus on addressing risk. So we have risk-based milestones. This is a strategy adopted from the Rational Unified process from many years ago now. So instead of saying, thou shalt fill out this template and thou shalt have this review, we instead say, you need to address these risks and have evidence of doing so. Do so appropriately. That gives senior management the visibility and control that they need if they're flexible and if they have the skills to actually govern and guide these different types of teams. Well, and this, by the way, reflects the overall mindset of PMI's portfolio, program, and project management governance standard. By the way, if you've ever had a chance to read that wonderful document. So because DA doesn't tell you what to do, it tells you what to think about. Well, how do we do that? So we describe team agility, so we're at the team level now, in terms of process goals. So what we say is that in order to be successful, in order to be effective, your team needs to address these basic process goals. You need to accomplish these basic outcomes. The way that you do that is up to you. Now, this advice is pretty high level. You can read this diagram, pretty high level advice, not that useful. So how do we capture detail? One way we do it is we provide options in terms of what we call goal diagrams. So this goal diagram, in this case for plan the release, describes one of the 24 bubbles on the previous slide. So the way you read this diagram, the way you read this diagram is the process goal is this rounded rectangle. The things that you need to think about are called decision points or intents. So what's the scope of the plan? What's your strategy for scheduling? What's your strategy for estimating? What's your strategy for your estimation? How are you going to measure your estimates? How are you going to capture your plan, if at all? What are your schedule cadences and so on? You need to think about these things. Now, the method, the various methods and frameworks of the world will often make decisions for you. They'll tell you, here's the way you do it. Here's the best practice. There's no such thing as a best practice. That's marketing nonsense. Any given practice or strategy works well in some situations and is a really bad idea in other situations. So if you want to be effective, you need to choose the right techniques for you to get the job done. So where methodologies will redact your choices, Discipline Agile instead gives you choices and says, hey, here's how you choose. So your choices are these things, these options. The ones that are highlighted are what we call suggested options. And what we mean by that is if you're in a reasonably straightforward situation, then the strategies that we suggest are probably about 95% accurate, right? Because some people don't just want to be told what to do. So for those people, we'll cater them a little bit. Now you still need to do a little bit of thinking because, like I said, it's only probably about 95% accurate for you if you're in a straightforward situation. If you're not in a straightforward situation, then you're going to have to do some thinking for yourself and choose the right options for you. Now you've probably noticed that some of these lists have arrows. That's what we call an ordered list. And what we mean by that is the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom. When there's no arrow, that's an unordered list. So each of those strategies has trade-offs, has advantages and disadvantages. But we can't tell you that one strategy is generally better than another strategy. We can't order them. It doesn't work out that way. So sometimes they're ordered, which gives you an improvement path. Sometimes they're not ordered and you just need to make choices and choose the right ones for you. Now, that diagram is effectively a decision tree for those of you familiar with those types of models, or you can think of it as a checklist. If you're reasonably experienced at planning, you probably know about most of those techniques. Maybe not all of them, but most, and that's okay. So chances are pretty good you also know how to choose between them. But let's say you don't have planning expertise. What do? Right? You're new to planning. Fair enough, right? At some point in your life, you were probably new to planning. So what do? Well, you can dive down into the next level of detail in the toolkit. This is a screenshot from a product called the DA browser. This is available to anybody free of charge at that URL. You don't even need to be a PMI member anymore to access this material. So this is the next level of detail. So here we are, we're seeing information about the source of plan, these various techniques. So for each of these techniques, we have brief descriptions. And actually, this isn't the greatest example. Usually it's a paragraph. We're going to see other examples in a minute where the descriptions are a little more fleshed out. But frankly, these are fairly straightforward techniques anyways. They don't need much description. There's also trade-offs, the advantages and disadvantages of that strategy. So we put the strategy into context. Now we've also, in this case, you just take my word for it, we have selected manager facilitated, that strategy, because you want to learn more about it. So in the top right corner, we see links to detailed sources. In this case, there's only one link, and that's linking out to PMI Standards Plus product for a bunch of articles about planning and sometimes videos and good stuff like that. In other times, there'll be links to books, multiple links to things, books, articles, videos, whatever. Because the thing is, you want to learn more, right? So you can keep drilling down to the level of detail until finally you hit, you understand enough about that technique. So that's the idea here. So why should you be interested in all this? This seems pretty complicated. Why should you care? That's a fair question. Well, oops, going in the wrong direction. So a good question to answer or to ask is how effective are frameworks? Like, why not just adopt a method like Scrum or SAFe or something like that? Like, certainly those must be good ideas. Everybody's doing it, so why not, right? Well, they are good ideas. They're all good things, don't get me wrong. But how effective are they in practice? Ignoring the marketing rhetoric, because I'm sure you've heard and seen and read case studies about, adopt this method and get 10 times productivity increase, and this organization did it, and here's what happened. Or, I'm sure you've heard claims, do twice the work in half the time, all this wonderful marketing stuff. And to be fair, I have seen improvements at that scale. But it's not because of the method they adopted, it's because they were so messed up, doing anything would have helped those teams. So we need to be realistic about what's really going on here. So a fair question is, well, how effective are these frameworks and methods in practice? So let's assume you're successful at adopting a new framework, say it's Scrum or SAFe or whatever. So there's an initial learning curve. Your effectiveness goes down, right? You got to get training, you got to figure out how to apply this thing, maybe get some coaching. But pretty quickly, things get better, things improve, right? Because you're successfully adopting this method. But eventually you hit the limits of the framework. Scrum, solves certain problems. SAFe solves certain problems. Once you solve the problem, they don't really have much more to say, right? They don't have any advice for you. Now, or the advice is pretty flaky, right? It's like, well, it's the art of the possible. This method is the art of the possible. You can do anything you want. You can tailor it yourself. We don't give you any advice to how to do that, but you can hire expensive coaches and get the job done, right? Hire the expensive consultants. Good. Yeah, that's generally good advice, actually, but it's expensive. So how effective are these frameworks? Well, if you look at the industry data, and this is some stats from a researcher, Dr. Don Reifer. He earned his PhD studying the question, how effective is Agile in practice? And he publishes, and he continues to publish, actually. This data is getting a bit old now, but he continues to publish good stuff about this. And he's found from a large number of sources that on average, we're seeing about a 7 to 12% productivity increase by adopting these frameworks and methods, which is good. That's nothing to sneeze at. That's a pretty good thing. And one of the reasons why I like his data and his results is he's not associated with any of these frameworks. So he's not a Scrum guy, he's not a SAFe guy, not a Discipline Agile guy. He's a researcher guy, right? He doesn't have an axe to grind. He's not trying to sell me a method. So, and it's interesting that his data, based on hundreds of teams, gives very different results than the marketing rhetoric coming from the methods people. What a surprise. So anyways, so there is, don't get me wrong, there is value in adopting these frameworks and methods, but maybe not as much value as you've been led to believe. Maybe we can do better. So who is doing better, right? So instead of falling for the marketing rhetoric, why don't we actually use our brains for something else, right? So why don't we look at the companies that we know are doing really well, what I call the apex level competitors. So these are the Amazons and the Googles and the Apples of the world, the Alibabas of the world, these organizations that are really, really effective, right? So why is Amazon so good? Why is Apple so good? What did they do? Did they adopt these out-of-the-box methods and frameworks? No. When you read the case studies, when you read the articles about these companies, they're not copying somebody else's approach. What they're doing is they're developing their own. They identify, and then they evolve their own ways of working. They follow a continuous improvement strategy. So what does that look like? So there's different flavors of this. I'll show you a reasonably straightforward one. But the basic idea is, Amazon will, a team in Amazon runs into an issue, something they want to improve. Either it's an obvious problem, or they get an inkling that, hey, you know what, maybe we can get better at this. So they identify a potential problem. Then they identify one or more strategies to address the problem, make things better. Then they try them out in practice. They experiment. They run the experiment and they measure. And they ask the question, well, wait a minute, how effective was this? We tried this new technique out, this new strategy out, did it work? If it worked, they adopt it. Didn't work, they abandon it. And then they continue on. So you might know this, there's, like I said, there's different flavors of this. You might know it as Deming's Plan, Do, Study, Act strategy, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, depending on, when you read Deming's work. Towards the end of his career, he started with Plan, Do, Study, Act. He evolved it to Plan, Do, Check, Act, and then he evolved it back to Plan, Do, Study, Act, because he actually measured, and he found that PDCA didn't work as well as PDSA. But be that as it may, a little process wonk, trivia for you. So the question is can we do better? I think we can. I know we can. So the organizations that are taking continuous improvement approach enjoy an improvement curve that looks like this. They're just constantly getting better. So the reason why Amazon is so competitive and so effective, or Apple or Alibaba, whatever organization you want to choose there, is because they've been improving, sometimes for decades. And they improve in very small steps, and they just keep improving and keep improving and keep improving and keep improving. That's why they're so far ahead of you now. That's why they're so competitive. And they continue to do so. One of the fascinating things about, any case study, any book that you read about those organizations that talk about how they got so good, they talk about continuous improvement, and they also talk about how they're still doing it today because they're afraid that somebody else will catch up to them. So even though they're ahead and dominate their markets now, they're afraid of somebody out competing them and getting better. Good for them. So what actually happens in practice? I spun a really good story here about how continuous improvement is so awesome. Well, why isn't everybody doing it? Why are so few organizations really that effective? Good questions. Well, what really happens? Well, what happens is you run an experiment, you fail. Now, I'm sure you've heard rhetoric around, you want to fail fast, which is and I'm a firm believer in failing fast. It's way better than failing slowly, because failing slowly takes time and money. Failing fast takes less time and less money. So it's probably pretty good. But you fail. So you try again. And you fail again. Fail fast again. And you try again. And you fail fast again. And you try again. Until finally you succeed. Then you adopt that, and then you share what happened, right? So the challenge with this approach are all these failures. If you're the person paying the bills and you're seeing your teams experimenting and failing and experimenting and failing and experimenting and failing, management thinking tells you, maybe we should stop that. That's a bad idea. All these failures are bad. Well, they're not. You're still learning something, but a lot of failures is bad. This is an expensive way to improve. I wonder if we could cut out some of these failures. So here's what you want to do. How can we improve on continuous improvement? So the first challenge is that third step. Some of our experiments fail. Yeah, you learn something, and yeah, we're failing fast, and that's pretty good, but it's still a failure. If you're paying the bills, it's still a failure. Can we be a little bit better at this? So although failing fast is fine, certainly better than failing slowly, I would rather succeed early. Let's get better at this. So the real problem is in the second step. If we can get better at identifying the potential techniques to experiment with, we'll have fewer failures. You're still going to have some failures. You're still going to, you're only human, right? You're going to make some you're going to make mistakes every so often. But you can make fewer mistakes if you're humble. Even though you're unique and face a unique situation, the reality is that you face challenges that have more than likely been solved by hundreds, if not thousands of teams before you, because you're probably not leading edge. And that's okay. So if we can find a way to leverage the learnings of others and make better decisions, we'll have fewer failures. Experience counts. So we can do that if we have an experienced Agile coach. Can you hire coaches? Do you have access to coaches? Do they have experience in the challenges that you face or will face? Can you keep them? Can you attract them? Big challenges. Can you afford them? Good Agile coaches are expensive. Now, there's a lot of Agile coaches out there, but the good ones are expensive and hard to find. I'm a firm believer in coaches, by the way. Don't get me wrong on that one. But if we have access, if we have access to a process knowledge base such as Discipline Agile Toolkit, and you know how to use it, you can fend for yourself. Or better yet, if you can hire a coach that knows how to use the DA Toolkit and help train you in that and help get you better at that, then you can make better decisions. We call this technique guided continuous improvement because we're leveraging the learnings of others that have come before us. So why is this important? Well, we saw that adopting a framework like Scrum or SAFe or whatever offers benefits. So it's a good idea. It's a good starting point. We've seen that the Amazons of the world, the organizations that are truly scary, and you wouldn't want to have to compete against them, but you probably will have to at one point, follow a technique called continuous improvement. And that's how they got so scary. And they're leading edge now. So they have to run experiments and have higher failure rates than you because they are attacking problems that maybe no other organization has attacked and dealt with yet, because they're that far ahead of you. Guided continuous improvement enjoys an even steeper improvement curve because there's fewer failures. It ends up being cheaper and faster because we're making better decisions. That's what Discipline Agile is all about. So our advice is you don't need to, abandon everything that you're doing. So you might be doing Scrum, you might be doing Safe now. Great. That's your starting point. So start where you are, or you might be brand new to Agile. Great. That's your starting point. So start where you are. Start making small improvements right now. So do the best that you can in the situation that you face, and you're professionals. I know you're doing that already, but always strive to get better. Strive to experiment with new ways of working. Adopt what works. Abandon what doesn't work. Always be trying to improve. Always be trying to get better. And that's what DA helps you to do. So, more interesting questions. Where do you actually need to improve? Where can you apply this? Well, obviously at the team level. Any team, like there's no such thing as a perfect team. Every team can get better. Every individual can get better, always. You can improve across teams. So for example, my team, we have to interact with the finance people in order to get funding for our efforts, for our projects, for what we do. We have to interact with them effectively. If they're out of sync with what we want to do, that's a problem for us, and we're probably a problem for them. So we need to agree on how we're going to work together. And when we want to improve the way we work together, we have to agree on what we're going to experiment with and then experiment together. And of course, improving across the organization, because all our teams interact with each other. Our value streams might be made up of many, many teams interacting together in order to bring a product or service to our customers. So if you want to improve across many teams, well, those teams need to agree on those improvements, right? So that's pretty sophisticated. So a lot of Agile transformations struggle in organizations. One reason is because there's a glass barrier, what I call a glass barrier to Agile adoption. Agile struggles to make it out of the software space. It struggles to get out of the IT ghetto. It really does. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Well, first, Agile comes from the software world, so it's geared for software, and all the experience the vast majority of coaches only have experience in the IT and software space. So they struggle to interact with other teams. They struggle to interact with the finance team in this example. So it's hard to get out. Yeah. As a result, if you don't have coaches with enterprise class experience, then they're really going to struggle to coach outside of their experience base. And this is what happens all the time. And of course, there's organizational antibodies, your existing culture, your existing ways of working, your desires of other people in your organization to work in a not so agile manner. The organization fights back. The transformation industry right now has about a 70 to 80% failure rate in digital transformations and in agile transformations. And it's because of the organizational antibodies. It's also because management doesn't have the skills to do transformations successfully either, and have unrealistic expectations about how to do it. So I would highly suggest getting training and coaching and help from actual experts. And PMI, if you're not familiar with it, PMI Brightline has some great organizational transformation certifications that you might want to look into. So team coaches, which is the vast majority of Agile coaches out there, focus on improving at the team level, which is good. That's important. But you really need a senior coach that understands the different parts of the business in order to negotiate these experiments across teams. Because if you can't speak intelligently to the finance people, if you don't understand their mindset, which is one of the reasons why we define the mindsets, have these additional philosophies for finance and for data management, security, and others. If you don't appreciate their mindset, if you don't talk their language, if you don't understand what is important to them, they'll ignore you. This is why most team coaches struggle to get outside of the software world, because they just can't speak the language of these non-software people. And then finally, enterprise coaches, or what we call value stream consultants. How do we, the skills to improve across the organization, across many, many teams at once, is challenging. You need some very experienced people to do that, or you'll struggle. And that's one of the reasons. That's probably the primary, one of the primary reasons why so many Agile transformations are a mess, is because they simply don't have the experience to get the job done, unfortunately. So let's walk through a few examples. So improving the team level. So I'm currently on a team, and we we make teddy bears. We're bringing teddy bears to market. And our existing customers love us. Like, who doesn't like teddy bears? But unfortunately, our customer base isn't growing. My product owner doesn't understand the needs of non-customers. Like our existing customers, we understand them. We bring out new teddy bear features all the time, different colors, different shapes, different ways of moving, I guess, in teddy bears. But and our existing customers love it, but we're not attracting new customers, and that's a problem for us. So what do we do? Well, if we had a really solid coach on the team who had deep experience in business analysis, they'd probably be able to give us good guidance. But sadly, we don't have that. We don't really have anybody on the team other than our product owner with business analysis experience, and she unfortunately doesn't know how to handle this problem. But we do have some people on the team that understand the DA toolkit. So we recognize that, we got a problem with the way we explore scope. We don't understand the requirements of how new customers would potentially use and work and get value from our teddy bears that we want to sell them. So we dive down to the next level of detail, the goal diagram in this case for explore scope. And we quickly realize, well, our challenge is around the way we explore usage. We don't understand how new potential customers will use our product. If we understood that, we'd be able to build something that they wanted and would buy. So we got a problem here. More than likely, we've got a problem here. So sadly, once again, we don't have anybody in the team experience with these techniques. And we've got some Agile training, and, we know the standard Agile techniques of user stories and epics and user story maps, but they're not getting the job done, sadly. So we go down to the next level of detail. We fire up the browser and we do a little bit of reading. We realize, look, there's all these different techniques, a bunch of trade-offs. So we go looking around for the technique that's most likely going to work for us in our situation. If we had a different problem, we would need a different answer. So your team might be experiencing requirements gathering problems right now too, but if it's a different flavor of problem, you're going to get a different, you're going to want to adopt a different technique than my team would. So my team looks at this and go, sounds like personas are the way to go, because we do a little bit of reading. Yes, this persona thing sounds pretty good. And of course, we could go to the next level. And in the case of personas, I think we reference a couple books in an article or two, and we could go do a little bit of reading. This persona thing sounds pretty good. Let's try this out. Sounds like it's going to work. We've made a good decision. Let's try it out, see if it works for us. Now, maybe it doesn't. There's still a low probability that this won't work out for us for whatever reason, but chances are pretty good personas are the way to go, because now we're making an intelligent decision of what to experiment with. That's the entire secret. So how do we improve across teams? So here's another example. In this case, we've got my team and we're producing teddy bears again, and we have to get financing for the next project, for the next teddy bear development effort, whatever that happens to be. I don't know anything about building teddy bears. But anyways, the finance people come to us and say, your funding is about to run out. We need you to create a project plan, a business case, give us estimates, blah, 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 blah. And we'll review it and we'll bless it. And if you're lucky, we will give you funding for another 6 months for the next project. My team says, well, wait a minute, we're Agile. What a waste of time. This is useless management overhead. We don't need to do this. We'd be, doing all this effort. We'd be producing no value. It's a waste of money. Why do you insist on this? What's wrong with you? Finance team comes back. Well, this is our standard process. This is the way we do things. You will do what you're told. We've tried your fancy Agile time materials in the past and didn't work for us. So you're going to do what you're told. We're the people with the money. You're the people without the money. So we're in charge because we got the money. That's the rule of the gold. That's the golden rule. Person with the gold sets the rules. Anyways, this is dysfunctional, as you can tell. Okay, we got a problem here. So once again, we dive down the toolkit because sadly, we don't have any finance experience on our team either. So we jump down and we look at what's going on here in this case. So we realize that our current approach is this. We're doing basically a fixed price upfront approach for a project. And we have to go through a formal request process. We have to jump through some hoops of the finance folks. Also notice that, oh, look, these are all ordered. These happen to be all ordered lists. This is actually the only goal where this is the case. Everything's ordered. And we're following strategies that towards the bottom of all those lists. So we're following a reasonably ineffective way of funding teams. It's common, but it's reasonably ineffective. I'm being polite on that one. So anyways, there's room for improvement. So let's potentially improve. So we'll dive down into the toolkit. Now, also remember that now we're cross-team. So we can't just say, oh, we're agile and we wanted time materials because, you know, that's agile and you're stupid. We're smart. You're stupid. You do what you're told. That's not going to work out well, right? We have to have an intelligent, respectful, polite conversation. So we do a little bit of reading. We look, first of all, we look at the techniques that we're currently following and realize, you know what, there's some problems here. There's some fairly common problems which we're experiencing. So now we can point that, we can say, you know what, here's, you know, we can say it in their language. We can say, you know what, we're running into these problems. These are common problems. See, you can see it here. It's in the toolkit. And we're experiencing this. We shouldn't be surprised that things aren't working as well as we'd hoped. We can also look at the toolkit and we realize, you know what, there's 4 different techniques that are better than what we're currently doing. Maybe we should consider them. So we go looking at them. So here's 2 of the 4. You know, the 2 immediately ones to the immediately above fixed price. And we realize, you know what, neither of them are perfect. They still have advantages, disadvantages. We also realize that time materials, which we've already failed at, isn't perfect, regardless of what, you know, our people may have learned on their Scrum courses and whatever, right? A lot of Agile coaches, they only know the one technique of time materials. So they'll say, well, we're Agile, we have to do time materials. No, we saw in this diagram here, there's 4, at least 4 common techniques that are better than what we're currently doing, not just time materials. So we're not a one-trick pony. We have choices. So let's choose the best strategy for us, not the one strategy that your method tells you to do. Let's be smart about this. So yes, there's different techniques, and and time materials does in fact seem better than what we're currently doing, but we've already failed using time materials. So we'll probably fail again for whatever reason. And the finance people have basically said, we're not interested in hearing about time materials. So they're not even willing to experiment with it anymore because they've been burned on it in the past, right? But we see, wait a minute, there's another technique in between called stage gate. Lower risk, not quite as effective as time materials, but better chance it'll actually work for us in our situation. Lower chance of failure. So let's experiment with that. So let's have an intelligent conversation with the finance people. Say, you know what? Have you heard about stage gate? And chances are pretty good they have, because this is a standard technique in the finance world. They might never expect you to be able to do it because you've never talked about it. But now we can talk about it intelligently. So we come to an agreement. Yeah, let's try stage gate, see if it works for us in our situation. Let's do one more example. This is the life cycle for value streams. Hi, if everybody could go on mute, that would be great. I'm almost about to wrap up here.
Okay.
This is the value stream life cycle. Okay, value streams begin and end with customers in mind. In this scenario, the PMO comes to us and they say, we need to release new offerings to market faster. We need to become more profitable. We need to make more money, right? The product management folks says, yeah, we'd love to do this. We want to release minimum business increments, smaller chunks of stuff into the market rather than big releases. We can do it faster and it's lower risk. This is great. And it's more flexible. Why wouldn't we? The portfolio management people come back and say, oh, well, wait a minute. No. We fund projects. We don't fund new features. The release management people, they come back to us and they say, well, wait a minute, we'd love to do this. A quicker release cadence is less risky, a lot better. But sadly, the data people can't handle this. It takes 3 months to make a database change. This is why we're so slow. It's because of those darn data people. The data people come back, wow, wait a minute, data is different. The rules don't apply to us. We're special. Total lie, by the way. But we need to think through everything up front, and Agile simply doesn't apply. And that's not the case at all, but that's what they believe. That's what their mindset tells them right now. And the portfolio management people, always useful. They come back and say, well, wait a minute, we need to release new offerings to market faster. So we've gone full circle on this discussion. So what do? Well, same story. We go back to the toolkit. We look at the goal diagrams for each of these process areas now. We look for better ways of working. We come to an agreement. This is what we're going to experiment with across these 4 teams. And then we run the experiment and hopefully it works out. So it's the same basic strategies as before, just slightly more complicated because more people with a wider range of skills and background are involved in the discussions. So to wrap up here before I go to Q&A, how do you learn more? So PMI, as you know, we're all about helping you to work smarter, to help you become change makers. And DA is a change maker play. Helping you to become better coaches, better decision makers, to enable the change that you want to make in your organizations. So successful organizations, the Amazons, the Spotifys, the Googles of the world, they take responsibility for evolving their own agility. They don't just adopt a framework. They might have started there years ago, but they quickly abandoned it and moved on. They built upon Scrum or SAFe or wherever they started and evolved away from it appropriately for them. So the frameworks are good starts, but they're not the end game for you. So you need to take responsibility. So Spotify, even though you might be familiar with the Spotify method, that's what they were doing 10 years ago. The real Spotify method is continuous improvement. So to learn more about DA, we have the DA Scrum Master certification. This is where you learn how to improve at the team level and be involved in improvement. The Senior Scrum Master, and this is misnamed. We're going to hopefully update the name of it soon. It's all about team coaching. So how do you lead improvement within a team? Discipline Agile Coach is all about becoming a senior coach. How do I lead improvement across disparate teams, like my team and the finance team, or my team and procurement, or my team, finance and procurement, because all 3 of us are working together to get something done. And the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant is really about enterprise coaching. How do we lead improvement across value streams and across the organization, across many teams interacting and collaborating together, and they therefore need to run improvement experiments across multiple teams at once with the same vision, and fair measures and all that good sort of stuff. So anyways, thank you very much. As you heard earlier, I'm available on Twitter and via LinkedIn and all that good sort of stuff, and I'm happy to take questions. And if it ends up that we run out of time for questions, I will answer via email, as long as you can get the questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them at some point. But anyways, we have a few minutes, so let's go to questions.
All right, there are a few questions. I'll ask the first question. It is, how does Discipline Agile affect the enterprise agility?
Yeah, so Discipline Agile, first of all, makes enterprise agility explicit. The mindset supports enterprise agility. It's based, it's geared for enterprise agility. The different philosophies for each area support the flexibility required for enterprise agility, and we support improvement across the entire organization, not just within software teams. So we really look beyond software and focus on the entire organization.
Okay. And the second question is, how is DA different from SAFe or Praxis? Are these similar, or are there advantage? One has more advantage over the other?
Yeah, so the frameworks and the methods define what to do, right? SAFe is a prescriptive, well-defined method, as is Scrum, as is Nexus, and others, which is great. They're good starting points in most cases. So as long as you can find, so whatever challenge your organization faces or your teams face, as long as you can find a method or a framework that reasonably solves that problem, then starting with that is probably a very good decision, right? Because they've made decisions for you. They tell you, they're a good starting point. They tell you what to do. It's sort of like following a recipe in a book, right? So if you're new to cooking, you follow recipes, but over time you learn how to cook. You gain the skills to cook, and you start, changing the recipes and changing your approach to meet the actual needs of your family, rather than what the cook told you to do. So that's the basic idea. So Discipline Agile teaches you how to be a cook. It teaches you how to make better decisions as to which ingredients to swap out, and how to adjust things in order to have something that's fit for purpose for you. So DA extends Safe or Nexus or Scrum or others. It's not a replacement. It's an extension to give you the skills that you need to do the process improvement that you have to have in order to be competitive.
Mhm. All right. The third question is, so with Discipline Agile Toolkit, we understand that it's evolving, right? It
Yeah.
keeps evolving based on new information. So among the audience, there's some amount of curiosity that how do these improvements happen? Is it based on research studies or lessons learned?
Yeah, all of the above. So we release quarterly. We actually just did a release on March 31st, last Thursday, and so we release quarterly. It's based on exactly that, research on experiences coming in from other teams, on working and supporting consulting firms and others out in the field, and a lot of reading, a lot of research, keep an eye on what's going on. One of the great things about particularly the Agile community is they share a lot of information. So there's a lot of great stuff out there that we capture and put into context. So our goal is not to create techniques, not to identify techniques, it's to put them into context. So when somebody describes a new technique, like a few years ago, mob programming, for example, 10 years ago now, probably. But when we weren't trying to reinvent mob programming. What we were trying to do was understand it, apply with it, play with it, understand it, put it into context, and give advice for when to do it and when not to.
Mhm.
So it's a different problem than the methodologists have for the most part. We just put things in context, and just might not be the right word, but it's a different game.
Got it. So the last question is, this is something you and I were talking about earlier, which is, in terms of Discipline Agile, how can teams overcome the classic enterprise culture and the complexity of certain organizational structure? Because ultimately it's happening within the governance of an organizational structure, right?
Yeah, definitely. So this is actually one of the challenges around transformation. So in our advice for transformations, one of the things you do, several things you do early on in a transformation is to assess where you are and to get help for the executives, some education as well as some long-term coaching. Because the executives need to understand the implications of what's going on. Their mindset will be out of whack with reality. To be blunt, they're not qualified to make decisions in many cases. But unfortunately, that's their job and that's what they do. And I'm an executive. I'm part of the problem. But they just don't understand it. So the last just unfortunate questions, like unrealistic questions, like tell me, how much is it going to cost? When is it going to get delivered? And they haven't even told you what the requirements are, but want you to give a date and a time. They want to give a date and a cost. Oh, and they're going to change their minds as well, halfway through, right? Or on a daily basis usually. So it's just completely unrealistic. And the problem is they're not getting the education and coaching that they need in order to improve. So you need to help senior management improve the way that they work, just as you would help the worker bees of the world to improve the way they work. People are people; they need help.
Right. Thank you so much, Scott. Those were the questions. So let me just go ahead with the concluding remarks, which is thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us and our audience. And to the audience, if you'd like to get in touch with Scott, please see his social media handles. We have shared that in the chat. And also, I think Scott has already shared it right here on the presentation itself. And finally, thank you to our audience for joining us today. For those of you who are PMI members, you will receive one PDU in your email with the PDU claim code in 2 weeks. And the recording of this webinar will be available on the PMI KSA YouTube channel in 2 weeks. So please see some informative links in the chat where you can write to us and share your thoughts on or feedback. And finally, please click on the survey link and let us know how you like the presentation, the webinar, and definitely share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a good night. Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah. My pleasure. Have a great evening, everybody.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.